Alright, mate. So, my question is, what are the implications for a society that locks up its truth tellers?
Well, to be fair, there's nothing new in society locking up its truth tellers. You could actually say that society does this all the time. In fact, I would go one step further and say that society needs to lie to itself to survive. Actually, there are lies that societies need to tell themselves in order to keep together what Plato would have called the big lie, right? It's the lies that keep society together, okay, right? So if you take any society, right, they have to have like a story. Humans are narrative creatures, right? So any society is based on a few fundamental lies that society needs to tell itself, right? It needs to believe that it's good, it needs to believe that it was founded in a good place, and it needs to believe that it has like a future. This is one of the reasons why the West is so messed up at the moment, because our big lie is being completely like screwed over. So a lot of people in the West think that, you know, the West is a horrible project and, you know, should never have been born, and no. But in terms of, you know, Assange, which I presume is what you're asking about, the real problem with locking up people who tell the truth is that you reduce the ability for people to give accurate information to the government, right? So, you know, the government's just composed of people. There's no magic to government. They're just people like following rules, right? And so they often have these like great ideas. Oh, we should do like this thing, right? Now, if there's a free flow of information, right, then they do the thing and it turns out to be bad, and a whole bunch of people say like that's really, really bad, right? Looking up truth tellers reduces the ability for accurate information to come back to government. This is what the media is literally supposed to do in a democratic society. It's supposed to provide information feedback on government policy and events, right? So the whole excellent example of this, right? By censoring all alternative opinions, people got the impression that this thing was like safe and it was tested and all this kind of other stuff, when in truth none of those things were true, as we are now finding out. So I guess the answer to your question fundamentally is, what happens when society starts locking up its truth tellers and starts censoring things? People die, right? People are always like, oh, misinformation kills. Censorship kills. Censorship is what kills, right? Censorship kills many more people than misinformation. If there are downsides to having a free flow of information, in that sometimes people might believe things that are not true, at least that is an organic effect. As soon as you get institutions dictating what people can and can't say, many more people die. And look, you look through history, this is absolutely true, and when it starts coming into fields like science or the law, many more people die. Classic example is the Holodomor in Ukraine. So the Holodomor came about because of a guy called Lysenko. Lysenko was Stalin's pet scientist, and Lysenko had this great idea, right, that genetics was a capitalist science, right? And of course the USSR was like, they reject capitalism. So Lysenko had this idea that nature was socialist, right? And to stretch this fucking stupid idea, he came up with such brilliant plans as, let's plant all of the crops in the middle of winter in the rainy season, right? And millions died because they fucked with the natural order, they fucked with science, and people died. So death, essentially, is the result of too much censorship and locking up truth tellers.
It sure is. It sure is. I mean, in my documentary, in the second half, I'm going to answer the question myself, and I'm trying to decide whether I should focus it on one issue, child is where we end up, kind of the end of civilization, a civilization that doesn't look after its children and attacks them instead. It's only going one way. Or I could branch it out to include lots of other issues.
It's such a clear lie, right? Like, you know, governments lie all the time, right? It's what they do, right? Because from their point of view, it's not really lying, right? Who really knows what the truth is after all, you know? And okay, there's something to that, right? If you've got a statement, there are more or less favorable ways that you can express that, right? This is the art of like communication and just diplomacy and all of these sort of like trickery subjects with speech. But
yeah.
with them, they just lied. They just straight up lied about it. Oh, it's been tested. Oh, it's safe and effective. The fuck? Nobody knew. There wasn't any test. The Pfizer trials, for example, don't even end until 2023, and it doesn't matter anyway because all of the subjects were given the like about 6 months into the trial, so it's been completely unblinded, right? There were no pregnant women in the study. The entire claim that it was safe for pregnant women was based on one French study. They studied 42 rats, right? And they killed half of them before they gave birth and the other half just after birth. So they didn't keep the babies alive to study any developmental defects or see whether it impacted their fertility or anything like that. It's all bullshit. Now, if your goal is to point out to people that you can't trust government messaging, I honestly don't know why anyone would be trusting government messaging in current year. But I mean, look, I know why. It's comfortable, you know, right? Believing that the government lies to you makes people anxious. You know, you got to do a lot of thinking. You got to be like, oh fuck, you know, the government's saying these things. What do they really mean? It takes up like space in your brain. It's so much easier just to relax into the abyss and just be like, the BBC. They told me, you know, BBC says it's misinformation. Fucking BBC. But to be fair, right, none of this is anything new. The reason why it feels new is because with social media and the amount of censorship that we have now, which can be like targeted and granulated, right? Before you could ban a newspaper, right? Or you could imprison like a person, but now you can deliberately target censorship on very specific issues against very specific people. It's, you know, it's become this new sort of censorship apparatus, and it's much more effective. I think that's why it feels new.
Yeah, the Ministry of Truth is behind us. Just over there, Senate House. Yeah, and in America, what's the name of that woman who's been put in charge of telling us how reality is?
Nina Jankovic.
Nina Jankovic, yeah. What do you think of her?
She is sort of a classic creature of the policy arm of the deep state, in a sense. You know, she went to like a very, very nice university, served on like a bunch of think tanks, wrote a bunch of papers on misinformation, and was also working with the Ukrainian government as well. I mean, you know, I'm sure it's completely above board. I mean, I wouldn't believe a word that comes out of that fucking woman's mouth, right? But to be fair, it's quite possible she believes a lot of the stuff that she says. It's very easy to do that now. If you only watch the mainstream media and if you are caught up in that foreign policy bubble and you assume, like as your starting point, that these organs are telling the truth and that they know what they're talking about, it's very, very easy to just disregard any inconvenient facts, and before you know it, you're at this position where, oh, you know, these inconvenient facts are like causing problems for us, we need to like shut it down. Yeah, I think this is probably going to go badly. The Disinformation Governance Board had a very, very bad launch. Everyone's calling it the Ministry of Truth now, but they'll probably just work in the background and just target people. You know, they'll probably have a job where basically they send emails to Google and Facebook saying, oh, we don't like what this person's saying, shut them down. Or maybe even more creepy stuff, you know, well, they'll, I don't know, send letters to foreign governments and have people like abducted, arrested, tortured. I mean, you know, if it's for the good of misinformation, I mean, you know, I mean, this is where it starts getting really, really creepy. You know, if you start making the argument that, you know, disinformation kills people, right? Say you say a certain piece of disinformation in your misinformation, whatever, killed 100 people. Does that mean you're justified in killing them to stop the spread? I mean, someone's going to make that argument. You know that someone's going to make that argument sooner or later. So, yeah, I guess we'll wait and see on that one.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for that, Chris. That's excellent.
No worries. Oh, and if you like this kind of stuff, check out Newsfist on Rumble or Odyssey. I did this kind of stuff all the time. Thanks, man.
Brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Excellent.